Yeah, they've sort of described themselves, OBS, we're not tech narcissists. Quite like how they like using technology, but it feels very pragmatic. That's how I'm interpreting it anyway.
I think we're going a few days apart.
I think that's in our contracts, yeah. We have to separate it by a few days. We can't go at the same time.
Creative differences.
Yeah.
The Olympics are fundamentally a made-for-TV event, and I think the Winter Olympics more so.
It's not something I want, but creating an artificial environment in which an artificial ski slope, a climate-regulated venue might be something that, it sounds expensive.
I've heard worse ideas, actually, to be quite honest. I don't know how feasible, and as you say, how expensive it'd be. I think that's going to require some professional intervention.
It was a poor attempt at humour.
No.
Trying to save that in the edit, Dano.
No.
Keep that in.
Hello and welcome to the SportsPro Podcast. Dust off your overpriced ski goggles, slip on your curling shoes and lie back on your luge. The Milan-Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics is here. Will the Games in Italy deliver a sustainable and cost-efficient event that shows it's still viable, or will it struggle to meet expectations and cast further doubt over the Winter Olympics? We'll be discussing that, as well as the business behind winter sport's biggest gathering, the key storylines for this edition of the Games and the event's long-term future. There's also mentions of Switzerland that are actually relevant to the podcast, more underwhelming quiz questions, a New Year's resolution already in jeopardy, and that's the SportsPro Podcast, the show breaking down the stories shaping sport. Back again is the person who puts the après in après ski. It's SportsPro editor Steve McCaskill. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Ed. I've got some irrelevant Swiss examples to complement the relevant ones today.
Very, very balanced. We like that. And a man who's done more mountain hikes than he's had hot dinners. It's SportsPro reporter Josh Sim. Hello, Josh.
Hello, Ed. That's quite a valid observation you've made there.
One of the few. And such is his commitment to winter sports, he went to Canada last month to get acclimatised to colder weather. It's SportsPro head of editorial Sam Carp. Hello, Sam.
Hello, I was wondering where you're going to go with that one. There's not quite as a natural segue to introducing me as there is for Steve and Josh, but nice work, very good.
No, I'll take that. Gents, the 25th Winter Olympics is here. It's taking place from the 6th to the 22nd of February. It's the third time the Winter Games have been hosted in Italy, the first under the tenure of new IOC President Kirsty Coventry, and it's the first summer or Winter Olympics to officially be hosted in two cities. We'll get into the big talking points around Milan-Cortina 2026 a little later on, but Steve, as someone whose prior living habits mean you've got much closer to the Winter Olympics than the three of us have, can you explain why it's a very different beast to the Summer Olympics?
Yeah, so I think it's different obviously the very makeup is entirely different. It's naturally smaller scale, but I think in terms of how it's followed, it feels very different. I think in most countries you get people are big fans of athletics, big fans of swimming, and that's a big thing to them. But the Winter Olympics almost feels like the biggest event of the winter sports season, and people who tend to follow winter sports will follow multiple disciplines. It's like it's a major championship. It's not necessarily a novelty or a sideshow. Of course, in the UK, we treat it perhaps a bit more as novelty because we don't have that same culture. It's only 4 years. Only time every 4 years we might watch curling, but this is the culmination of a cycle in biathlon, a cycle in alpine skiing and Nordic skiing, and there's more developed seasons around them. So it's quite a big thing. It might seem maybe not as important as the Summer Olympics to many people, but it's a huge deal. And I'm not saying we work in silos here at SportsPro, but we found out minutes before recording that you're actually going to the Games, as is Josh. Is this a sort of a double act, or are you going to be doing separate things? I think we're going a few days apart. We're not going, sports.
I think that's in our contracts, yeah. We have to separate it by a few days. We can't go at the same time.
Creative differences.
Yeah.
Or, SportsPro lads on tour, one of the two. So no, I'll be heading out there to look at the technology behind the Games, and also going to see some short track skating, and then some women's ice hockey supporting Switzerland, who I'd say in the Winter Games probably are my First Nation. So, yeah.
What about you, Josh? What are you saying?
Weirdly enough, we didn't discuss this. The same sports, I think, speed skating and then ice hockey.
You are going to have to talk to each other, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not looking at the tech infrastructure, though, so my trip feels less productive than yours does. But, yeah.
Just something we might get onto in a minute, that does reflect the fact that this is the most geographically spread out Games in Olympic history. And the fact is, I think it's speed skating, figure skating and ice hockey are in Milan, and everything else is on the other side of the country. So there's not too many options if you're going for the city-based break.
Well, there we go. Let's get into the business behind it then. We're going to talk about sponsors, broadcasters, venues. Sam, I want to come to you first on the sponsorship front. What have we got to look out for in that regard?
Obviously, you've got the IOC's top partners, who this is obviously a flagship moment for them. They're the ones who invest the most in the Olympics. Obviously, global partnerships have the right to activate those sponsorships around the world. So TCL will be the first. This will be the first games for them since they signed their deal with the IOC. The first Winter Olympics for AB InBev as well, where they'll be promoting Corona Zero. And then obviously you'll have the kind of domestic sponsors as well. The Italian, or the local organising committee, had a sponsorship revenue target of 550 million euros, I believe, and we've seen some, obviously, major Italian brands come on board. We've seen the likes of Uber come on board as well as a domestic sponsor of the games. So, lots of sponsorship activity going on, I imagine. I think it's probably similar to what we were talking about there in terms of the, I suppose, differences with the Summer Olympics, for example. It's perhaps slightly different in terms of how brands would activate around the Winter Games compared to a summer one, I think. Obviously, as Steve just mentioned, with the Summer Games, with Paris, for example, you had lots of people staying in the city, lots of opportunities for kind of those, big activations where there's going to be a lot of footfall, whereas I think with the Winter Games, there's probably maybe a little bit more leaning into kind of the digital side, the media side of things to activate those partnerships. I'm sure there'll be lots of sort of in-person stuff as well, but I think that's probably a little bit of a different nuance around the Winter and Summer Olympics too.
So there's plenty of crossover though, because Visa are quite big sponsors of the US team, US alpine skiing team. They were a member of the program. So just because it's lots of partners may come on with the view to activating in a big way in the summer, there's still opportunity to carve out space with the winter, especially for the US, which is one of those countries where it's got a major presence at winter games as well. Things like figure skating in particular are a huge deal. So yeah, different but still a major event for them.
What Sam said about sort of the number of domestic sponsors, it does feel as though the whole country's leaning into the games. You have sort of the financial sector, the Italian financial sector, the transport sector, all of these different sectors are sort of coming together to commemorate, to be part of the games and celebrate the games in a way in which, the Winter Olympics has previously been held in, China and Sochi. And it does feel as though, I don't know, this game seems to sort of is inspiring a lot of businesses and is seen as a big national moment, and so they've all decided to get on board with it.
And the broadcasters, Steve, we have been teased many tech innovations for this edition of the games. What are they, and how big a difference do you think they'll make?
If we look at the broadcasters again, it's going to be covered by OBS, which is, as it has done for quite a long time now. NBC in the US. Intriguingly, it's a massive year for NBC because it's got the Winter Olympics and the Super Bowl, and indeed Mike Tirico will be out there covering both. So that's the big story on that side. And then in Europe, it's Warner Brothers Discovery and the European Broadcasting Union and the various for the public broadcasters that it works with. I think AI again is the big buzzword in terms of what it's going to be offering for fans, and in terms of how it's captured. Again, a lot of the technologies that we've seen in other events, in terms of how it's going to scale the content, and how it's going to put it out there. We've seen dynamic camera angles in the past. It's not necessarily AI per se, but something that's become really common in recent years in alpine skiing are the drone shots. I mean, that's completely changed how skiing has been broadcast. There's also, in terms of how the data tracking on it, I mean, I'm using skiing as the main example because that's the one I'm most familiar with. But if you look at in terms of what they can do on the piste in terms of visualization, giving fans a better idea of what's happening on the piste in terms of time splits, the piste is just becoming much more intelligent. I'd say timing, AI in terms of and new shots, in terms of the way fans are consuming this. Again, lots of people don't know a lot about these sports, particularly again in the UK. Things, the mechanics of, for example, if you're on a bobsleigh team, the role of each member, with things like AI and skeletal tracking and things like that, you'll be able to understand the role of each member and how that relates to the timing that you're seeing on the screen.
Yeah, some of the features are going to be. They're going to be using first-person view drones in sliding sports for the first time. Some of the AI tech they're going to be using real-time 360 replay, which you alluded to, and get-in curling stone tracking system, which I know we've been waiting for bated breath on. They're going to be using another AI feature is an Olympic AI assistant. That's going to be slightly different because it's not going to be the data gathering. Essentially is going to be stuff sourced across the internet, which obviously can be inaccurate. It's been tailored specifically for the games. It's going to be in 12 different languages. Yeah, they've sort of described themselves, OBS, we're not tech narcissists. I quite like how they like using technology, but it feels very pragmatic. That's how I'm interpreting it anyway.
Yeah, I think also, you look at the broadcast strategies of the events often decided years in advance. And obviously when you're working on a very cyclical nature like the Olympics, they'll be pragmatic about it. They don't need anything for the sake. They're not going to do technology for technology's sake. With the drones being used for the sliding sports, that's the one to watch out for. That's going to be hugely transformative. Television doesn't do a great job of conveying speed, and also, in my view, also gradients. So I think that's going to be really exciting to watch, and probably a bit hair raising when you realise just how fast they are going down a hill.
I think there's definitely a bit of a different challenge, I guess, with the Winter Olympics, given perhaps some of the events aren't quite as spectator friendly as some of those in the Summer Olympics. So as you say, there's probably from a broadcast perspective, being able to capture and convey that to the TV audience is probably another challenge. Without going into the kind of so far into the technical side of it, as you've given the preview there, Steve, I think also from a viewership standpoint, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this Winter Olympics. Obviously for Beijing, there were some record lows for both NBC and BBC, I believe, particularly around the opening ceremony, and then I think NBC had some poor viewership throughout the event. So just interested to see whether that bounces back. There seems to be some buoyancy that there will among advertisers. I think NBC announced earlier this month that it had already sold out of its inventory. So hope there, but it'll be interesting to keep an eye on the TV numbers for NBC, but also more broadly as well.
I mean, these are the first games that will benefit from that Paris bounce. I know it's not the Summer Games, but in terms of how the Olympics were covered, how the style of the content in terms of how they cover individual athletes and the storytelling, I think that's going to have a big impact. And again, I think just the venue as well. It's the traditional winter sports country. It's the first games in Europe since they were lost in Italy in 2006. I think all of that, creating that sense of destination, using those techniques, I wouldn't be surprised to see some really strong figures again in the US. People like Lindsey Vonn back as well. She has huge star power. Figure skating, as I mentioned before, is always a big draw for American audiences. So yeah, I think if I was NBC, I'd be quietly confident having a much better games than perhaps the last two iterations.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the venues then. They're going to Milan-Cortina is going to use 25 event venues dotted across 4 clusters in northern Italy. More than 90% of the venues already exist or will be temporary. Josh, it feels like the days of snowy white elephants after an Olympics are long gone.
Wait, I've never heard of snowy white elephants.
A white elephant is something you build and then it's left there and doesn't really.
Oh, okay.
It was a poor attempt at humour.
No.
Good luck trying to save that in the edit, Dano.
No.
Keep that in.
Oh, I knew it was kept staying in. Don't worry.
Yeah, I do.
I did enjoy the look of terror on your face though when I said it.
I was wondering how to interpret that. Yeah, I think it's about reusing and having sort of the venues in place. I think that's. It's going to be helpful in terms of establishing a post games legacy. You say that they've got a lot of established venues, but even some of the upgrades to some of the venues have taken time and have gone over the budget or the allocated spend, particularly with regards to the luge venue in Cortina and the ice hockey venue that Steve and I are hoping to visit is still sort of not completely finished yet. So still a bit of a little bit to go, but I'm sure that's going to be hugely beneficial. And as well, given that the last couple of Olympics have been in sort of more temporary sites, it does feel you feel hopeful that there are going to be a lot of people who are able to use those facilities post games.
Yeah, it sounds like tried and tested and reducing risk are kind of sort of the key sort of buzzwords associated with the venues. Would that be fair to say?
I imagine so. I think if you just look at this is clearly the way forward. Now we'll probably come onto this a little bit more and later on. But if you look at Paris, there is just a clear focus now in terms of making making these events like viable for hosts, you're not going to be seeing situations anymore where, a high percentage of venues are going to have to be built from scratch. It's all about kind of, repurposing existing venues, as Josh said, kind of upgrading them, making the most of those that are already there. So I think that's just kind of the model for the IOC moving forward if this is going to continue to be viable.
Yeah, definitely. And viability is definitely one of the key storylines I would associate with this Games. I mean, it's not just viability from an economic standpoint, but also sustainability. Obviously, that's much more of a hot topic, no pun intended, with events nowadays. But it particularly feels more pertinent when the snow is the Winter Olympics' playground, and there's a rapidly declining pool of hosts. So that I guess this event needs to show that it is still a viable concept in the long term, doesn't it, Steve?
Absolutely. I think, particularly on the winter side, you're going to move away from city-based hosting structure. I mean, to be honest, in practice, it's rarely been a point. I mean, when the games were in Vancouver, there were skiing events far away from Vancouver, even though it was labelled as such. But that's just the nature of winter sport. They're often in more rural areas and mountainous areas. So that hosting structure, I think you are going to see just almost like countrywide bids, particularly in Europe. Looking further ahead to Switzerland, in terms of sustainability, every time that the Swiss have tried to get a bid through for the last couple of cycles, it's been torpedoed by local politics. So there's your first relevant Swiss fact of the of the POB, because it's been gone to referendum and there's been concerns about cost. So by dispersing that over multiple venues, you're also easing stress on the local infrastructure, because a lot of these places just can't cope with that many visitors. These are ski resorts; they're not international sporting centres, and the Olympics not the same as a regular visit from the World Cup, Alpine Skiing World Cup. In terms of sustainability, it was only last week we had that report from the World Economic Forum that, you have to forgive me, I haven't got the figures in front of me. I think it was the global sports industry is going to be worth 2.3 trillion.
Well, it was going to be worth around sort of 8 trillion, I think, but there was going to be 1.6 trillion eroded by environmental impacts.
Yeah, that's a year as well.
Physical inactivity.
And winter sports in particular, there's lots of there's some existential concerns for a lot of winter sports. So you're looking at making it sustainable from an economic point of view, but there's also what will the Winter Olympics look like in the way we're going even 20 years time. So I think anything that can make it more sustainable from a financial point of view, with also an eye to the wider questions, and terms of how, again, some of it's out of their control, but just how you organise mega events, and is this a way to reduce the Olympic movement's contribution to climate change?
Yeah, and the NHL is going to be back. Josh, how big of a potential impact is that going to have, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a major deal, given that a lot of the NHL current players come from Europe, so they'll all be representing their home country. So, and not to mention that, obviously, in North America, last year we had the Four Nations Face-Off, which was a massive success, and featured sort of the US and Canada and international rivalries that you obviously don't get with the NHL. So, having that in a context, in a circumstance like the Olympics, where you're playing for medals and you're playing for international pride, should be really exciting. And looking forward to seeing some of the best players in that league sort of show their skills on a bigger stage, arguably.
Yeah, and there are usually always some athletes that make a name for themselves during the games. You mentioned Steve, Lindsay Vonn. Are there any others that people are going to be keeping an eye on?
I mean, if we talk about NHL, I think Sidney Crosby, essentially his, but when he scored the winning goal for Canada in 2010, he was at the beginning of his career, and now he's one of the eldest statesmen of the NHL. But because the NHL hasn't participated in the last two games, this I think is only his third Olympics. So I think that's going to be definitely one to watch. I think again from Beijing, someone like Eileen Gu, from Italy, from a host nation, Sofia Goggia. I think she'll be the one that they pin their hopes on, particularly with injuries in the Italy team. And I'm just going to give a shout out to Harry from the Estonian mixed curling team, who actually gave me a curling lesson 6 years ago. And he's qualified with his partner. Harry Lil. But obviously we're on first name terms because we have a...
So my ears ringing from that name drop. Yeah.
We have a strong coach-athlete relationship. Here we go.
Any from you, Sam?
Well, I think a few of them have been rattled off already, but it was interesting. I had a look at our 50 most marketable from last year in the top 150. Not a single winter sport athlete in there, which probably tells you how significant these games are for the profile of those individuals. But there are some in the past who have featured. Chloe Kim has been on there several occasions. Lindsay Vonn's been on there before. Michaela Schifrin. Eileen Gu as well was on that list on the back of her performances in Beijing. So I imagine that we'll potentially see some on 50 most marketable next year on the back of this event. But the NHL side of things, I think that's a really interesting dynamic that Steve's already alluded to, and that's another thing that could contribute to viewership improving in the US and Canada in particular. I think the way that they've scheduled the event is to make sure that they're in good time zone, in a sort of like good time slot for those markets. And I think it's also just interesting. They were talking about the ice hockey venue and some of the challenges with it, and it just kind of it tells you kind of why maybe the NHL has avoided it in the past, but also because they haven't had the control over that event, but also just shows you how serious they are about growing that international footprint now. Josh already mentioned the Four Nations. They've got the World Cup of Hockey coming, so just kind of retaining interest in the sport outside of the club game. They're seeing real value in that international element now, and kind of some of those rivalries that form on the international stage being brought back in and kind of driving interest in that way as well.
Let's see how much you've been paying attention in the build-up to the games, other than hobnobbing with Estonian curlers. Who can tell me which country did Italy beat to be named host of the games?
Was it Kazakhstan?
No. Any advances on Kazakhstan? Don't look at my screen, Sam.
Was it?
I'll guess Austria.
It's not Austria.
Okay.
That was actually my guess.
It's Sweden. It's a joint bid from Stockholm and Åre. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Apologies to our listeners in Sweden. Oh, there we go. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Question 2. What type of skiing will debut as a Winter Olympic event in 2026?
Ooh, mountaineering.
I thought about to say scuba diving.
No, basically, I
haven't got my ears.
He did get there first, but I was going to say ski mountaineering.
Sorry,
the extra syllable
serves you right. Serves you right for trying to fit in so many words.
Yeah. Point for Sam. And finally, what was the last Winter Olympics to have its opening and closing ceremonies in different venues? Because obviously 2026 will. What was the last? Just need the year. Bonus point if you can tell me which one it was.
2010 Vancouver.
Incorrect.
2006.
Incorrect. Sam, do you want to take a punt?
Sochi 2014.
Incorrect. It was Sarajevo 1984.
Oh dear. We were way off there.
Wasn't around. Can't remember.
Sport didn't begin until what, the year you were born? Is that what
I'm not going to give that away.
We'll keep that quiet. Yeah, ignorance is bliss there. Right, that'll do for part 1. We'll be back just after this. Welcome to part 2 of the SportsPro Podcast. Let's talk about the future of the Winter Olympics. We kind of touched on it already in part 1. I feel like there's a lot riding on this games, and there's a lot about the future of the Winter Olympics that seems to be up for debate. Where it be, I'm probably going to reel them off now. Where it's going to be hosted, venues, how do we broadcast, the financial and environmental sustainability, new sports. That's it. Goodbye. No, but let's hone in on some of them specifically. One of the things that's been touted potentially is rotating hosts, having a pool of rotating hosts. We know French Alps going to host in 2030, Utah in 2034. Swiss bid has come in. Steve, do you like the idea of rotational hosts, or what was your take when you heard that as a potential option?
In principle, I don't like it because, apart from me watching the Olympics, I like to see it to go to different places, different sporting cultures, and I do think the destination of the event is a really important part to it, and I think it does affect how I think about previous iterations of the games. But I think when it comes to Winter Olympics, it does make more sense. Some of the reasons we've mentioned in terms of having, these are small places, and building all that infrastructure to support a global mega event in the mountains doesn't really seem like the smartest thing to do it in too many places. And then also I think of the nature of the Winter Olympics and what I said about at the top, that this is almost like a major event in what is a season. It's not, people who like alpine skiing will watch the whole season. They'll look at this is the crowning moment. So it's almost like part of a wider ecosystem, and therefore it would seem odd to have the downhill in a country doesn't have that same passion for it. So it just feels a bit strange to me from a winter sports perspective. So I know obviously there is the sustainability piece, which I think is the strongest one, but I think, to have it in France, in Austria, Switzerland, Italy, the US does make sense, but at the same time, in principle, not allowing a newcomer to come in, it does feel a bit gatekeeping for the summer.
Not very Olympic spirity, is it? I think, but also the thing that you said before about it being more suited to the Winter Olympics, I think that we're constantly being told that the places that are actually going to be able to host this is going to shrink by X amount. You mentioned the World Economic Forum report before. I think in there was a stat saying that by 2040 there's only going to be 10 destinations that could feasibly host the Winter Olympics by that point. So you might have to rotate it as a matter of necessity above rather than anything else. I almost wonder if we're at this stage now where you've got more regionalised Winter Olympics. The Swiss bid that we talked about before has been described as a decentralised Winter Olympics, as you said, to kind of ease the burden on local infrastructure. I wonder if we'll even get to a point with the Winter Olympics where we could even see, we've seen it already with some events in the Summer Olympics, but multi-country events where you kind of have clusters of it happening in countries that are on similar time zones. I think the Olympics are fundamentally a made-for-TV event, and I think the Winter Olympics more so, given that fewer fans attend, more people are probably watching it remotely. So I do wonder if that's something they might think about further down the line. Potentially having the ice events in one country, the sort of skiing events, for example, in another, and scheduling it in that way. I imagine that might create some challenges around how the IOC is traditionally operated in terms of having its broadcasting hub in one place and those kinds of things. But I think it's potentially something to consider in another way around, kind of, as you mentioned, avoiding some of that local pressure and backlash around the negative economic cost of hosting.
Is it too outlandish to, something like a Saudi Arabia? Because we know they're due to host. I mean, you laugh. They're due to host the 2029 Asian Winter Games. Sort of this desert-defying ski resort in Neom. I mean, is that too outlandish?
I think it probably is outlandish. I don't know how that would adhere to sustainability concerns without knowing.
Hot take coming up. Money talks.
I mean, without knowing too much about the specific infrastructure, and I'm sure there's. They would refute the argument somehow. That doesn't really feel feasible at all.
Well, there's artificial snow, mountain village, year-round skiing. They're basically aiming to establish a winter sport. Sorry, I'm not bigging up the Saudi tourism industry, but we've heard it mentioned in some circles that the Winter Games could be a precursor to that. It does seem far-fetched, but such is the world we live in these days. Nothing would surprise me.
I mean, nothing would shock me.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd like to see them put a biathlon track, perhaps, in Neom. That might be the biggest, the one that I can see, just off the top of my head. I don't know. I'm still going to stick my neck out and say no, not really. I don't feel that's a controversial take at all.
Any new sports that the IOC might look to include in future editions to sort of be down with the kids?
Well, they've included a lot of the ones to be down with the kids already, with the addition of freestyle skiing and snowboarding, which was easier for them to do in the Winter Games because it wasn't quite as big a schedule as the Summer Games. And there's an interesting dynamic with the Winter Olympics in that for a lot of the athletes, the Winter Olympics hasn't been the peak of their sport. It's been the Winter X Games. So that's an interesting thing to see. And that's actually influenced what the IOC has done with the Summer Games when it's trying to include some of the other sports, things like skateboarding, for example. But I think in terms of the freestyle events, I think they've got most of them in now. I can't think of too many. Obviously, again, what did you call it? I said ski mountaineering. You said mountaineering, skiing.
I said mountaineering, yeah.
There's talk of trying to get synchronized ice skating in at some point. But the biggest discussions have been perhaps taking some events that are in the Summer Olympics to the Winter Games because there's more space in the schedule, more space than stand out. And again, a lot of these would happen indoors, so the time of year isn't a concern. I think Taekwondo and judo have been mentioned as potential candidates, but there's been a bit of a backlash from the winter sports federations who believe that it would dilute what makes the game special and also their showcase in the calendar.
Quite a traditional view, that, though, isn't it? It's kind of all the events of the Winter Olympics must take place on snow or ice, whereas you're circumventing that snow issue if you bring in cross-country running or something like that. But I do wonder if sort of thinking like that is required. I think part of what's been good about the Summer Olympics is the introduction of 3x3, for example, skateboarding, sport climbing. It does bring in a kind of a new audience. You could even argue there's some events in the Summer Olympics that are more suited to a Winter Games. I mean, even
I'd agree with. I'd take.
You could say that about football, for example. I mean, not from a calendar perspective, definitely not. But from the time that it should in theory, be really taking place. But I think obviously the winter federations, there's interests that they have to protect as well. As you say, it's their showcase, but also from a financial perspective, if you're bringing more federations into the mix, that's revenue distribution has to be shared a little bit more. So I think that's part of another reason that you're seeing that opposition.
What about you, Josh?
New sports that I think could be in the Winter Olympics.
Just, what your thoughts on the future of the event, really?
I was thinking about mountain biking. I thought that might be a cool winter sport thing to have, going through the mountains. Then the future of the Winter Olympics, listening to the guys talk about sort of the challenges of countries that, may not be enough snow. I wonder whether we're seeing with some sports sort of go for a very tech-focused indoor arena, and I wonder maybe having to, and then it's not something I want, but creating an artificial environment in which an artificial ski slope in a climate regulated venue might be something that, it sounds expensive, and granted I don't know how many countries could afford it, but I wonder whether that's a way to sort of, again, circumvent the sort of the heat of that climate change is sort of bringing, and whether that's sort of something that going forward someone cleverer than me can sort of come up with.
I mean, are you saying we should get Tomorrow Sports to do what they've done for TGL, but for winter sports? I mean, I've heard worse ideas, actually, to be quite honest. I don't know how feasible, and as you say, how expensive it'd be, but that's not the worst thing that's come out of this podcast, definitely.
More likely than hosting it in a desert country, possibly.
I'm going to go trademark the idea right now.
There is
after this pod.
Kirsty Coventry is doing a Fit for the Future. Running a Fit for the Future process at the moment. She'll have done that by the time this podcast goes out. But yeah, she's inviting journalists to even participate in that, Josh. So maybe you should join and put that forward. But I think that's another. But I think that's another interesting thing that we get. All these questions that you're asking us, Ed, are going to be put to Kirsty Coventry, I imagine, over the next few weeks. And we sort of mentioned it during our previous podcast, having her as one of our 10 influencers for this year. Obviously, the delivery is down to the local organising committee, but this is going to probably be the first time where we really see how she deals with that spotlight. And, the IOC kind of does disappear a little bit in the period between games, whereas the 2.5 weeks that the Olympics are happening, there are daily briefings. The press is constantly asking questions, whether it is about the future of Olympics, whether it's about politics, what's going on with the US right now, whether they're going to make any decisions on that. So that's going to be going from a tangent a little bit, but it's going to be interesting to see how Kirsty Coventry deals with those questions that are being put to her.
Yeah, absolutely. What for Kirsty Coventry would be a successful Milan-Cortina 2026? If she kind of had to boil it down into a sentence or two, what do you think that would be? That's for the run.
I mean, I can put it in a few words. I mean, be like Paris. I think there's a lot of parallels there. Again, Paris was the first one not to be affected by more majorly by COVID and politics in several cycles. This is the first Winter Games to be, again, in traditional winter sports country, not overshadowed by politics in quite some time. I just think if it's, we've spoken at length at SportsPro about how successful those games were. Just, I think, even a fraction of that, and just perhaps a bit more, have a few more answers about the future of the Winter Olympic movement. I think that would be very successful games.
Hard to disagree with that. Anybody like to add anything there?
No, I think, we talked a lot about a lot of the athletes we sort of talked about have been established winter sports athletes. And so I guess for her, if she can find, I know Chloe Kim's relatively young, for instance, but find a few newer, fresher faced people that sort of can, lead that Winter Olympics movement going forward, and have, give something for people to sort of hang on to going to 2030, 2034, and create like a cast of new stars, essentially.
I think in that regard, I think maybe strong performances from non-traditional Winter Olympic nations. So Lucas Bratton is now, who used to represent Norway in alpine skiing, I think his mum is Brazilian, so he now represents Brazil. So that's going to be, if you get more people involved in Winter Olympics, more, and I think the freestyle events are a way of getting people from non-traditional countries involved. I mean, it's one area that Britain are very strong at, for example. I think that'll be successful.
Before we go, I said I would keep you all honest with your New Year's resolutions, and I think one of us needs to come clean about theirs, and I think clean might be the operative word. Steve, you flaunted your disposable income on the last pod by saying you wanted to cut down on the amount of people you were paying to do tasks around your house. It now sounds like you might have to shelve that. Could you divulge, please, for the listeners?
Are we really going to take the pod even lower than it can go? Yeah, unfortunately. So, beginning of when we refreshed this podcast, I think I said I wanted to move house, and I have moved house, but I've discovered that one of my toilets is flushing into my shower. So, I think that's going to require some professional intervention. I don't think that is too extravagant to want functional plumbing on that scale.
I think we'll allow it. Although necessity sometimes is the mother of invention.
God, no wonder you're so desperate to get to the Olympics with that going on and get away as quickly as possible.
I mean, yeah, let's just leave it. Just leave my house. It's done.
Be like Paris.
Indeed. Well, stay tuned for more plumbing updates in the next episode. But that'll do for today, I think. Thank you, Steve, and good luck.
For which bit? I mean, thank you anyway.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Ed.
And thank you, Sam.
Cheers, Ed.
Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. If you've enjoyed this episode, leave us a nice review. And if you haven't, do it anyway. Email us at editor@sportspromedia.com if you want to get in touch. A reminder to listen to our other podcasts, Stream Time, New Era, and Mike's Out. And before we go, there's a little bit of news. This will be the last SportsPro podcast for our executive producer, Manny, who is leaving us at the end of January. Manny, it's fair to say, has without a doubt been the driving force behind the reboot of this show, and she was dealt a pretty bad hand having the four of us on it. But this pod wouldn't be here without her vision and dedication. So from all of us, Manny, thank you for all your hard work, your belief in us, and all the very best for the future. The SportsPro Podcast is produced by Dan O'Ling. Our executive producer has been Manny Gill. This episode was recorded at SportsPro Towers in London.